Effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Lorenzo, also known as Ricky France, and a great episode for you today. Today we have author, researcher, thinker, Micah Dank. You guys might know him because he has done his rounds a little bit on some of the shows that I'm sure you're a fan of if you're a fan of the Ripple Effect Podcast. But some interviews I highly recommend you guys checking out are his appearance on Tinfoil Hat Podcast with Sam Tripoli, Macroaggressions Podcast with Charlie Robinson, and he's been on Midnight Mike's show, the OBDM show. So definitely check out those interviews. With his appearance on the Ripple Effect Podcast, it means he's been on all four shows of the four hosts of the Union of the Unwanted. He's also been on the Union of the Unwanted. He was on the occult episode, so definitely check that out. Super fascinating discussion. I highly recommend you guys checking out that one. And we had a really, really good conversation about biblical symbolism, the stars, the skies. If you guys are listening to this, I highly recommend you guys go into one of the video platforms. Go to Odyssey, Library, BitChute, or YouTube and check out the video episode of this, because we actually share the stuff that he's talking about, so you can actually see the images of the stuff he's referring to and the symbolism that he's referring to and the biblical texts and all that stuff. So definitely one of those shows you don't want to just listen to, you want to watch. So go to any of those places and you can find links to all those channels, my BitChute channel, Odyssey, Library, YouTube, all in the show description. And if you're watching the video, you'll see me with a Union of the Unwanted t-shirt. So now we have hoodies, t-shirts, all types of merch available. Very soon to make our lives a little easier and your lives a little easier, we're going to have the unionoftheunwanted.com, have that URL, bring you right to our link tree. It'll just bring you right there, and then you can have access to all our links everywhere that we're at. And speaking of that, in the show description is also my Patreon page. So if you can support me on Patreon, it's highly recommended. I am trying to do this value for value thing where if you get some value out of the show, try to give some value back if you can. It doesn't have to be financially. Share the show, review the show, all that type of stuff if you can't financially support the show. But I am still on Patreon, even though a lot of people in alternative media are bailing on Patreon or being censored on Patreon. So as long as I can be there, I will. I don't post any content there. So hopefully that keeps me around because it is convenient using it, and I have connected with a lot of fans using it, which I like. But if you do support me on Patreon, and every penny helps, even if it's just $1, it helps. But if you can support me on Patreon, I do a Patreon podcast once a month where I do a show with just my Patreon supporters, then I release it as an episode. So that's one more reason to support me on Patreon. And then also I have a PayPal account if you want to tip the show. Some of you guys have, and I really appreciate it. And then I also have a Rockfin channel. If you go to rockfin.com/ripple effect, and remember all these things that I'm discussing are always in the show description. So make sure to check that out and find these there if you're looking for them. But if you go to rockfin.com/ripple effect, I have a show called Ricky Rants on Rockfin. I do it once a week. Basically, it's me just chatting and ranting about whatever's on my mind. And the last episode that I just did, which I think was episode 7, is free. So what I did is I put my last episode free, so people who are thinking about going to Rockfin can kind of see what the show's about. And if you open up a free account, you can get everybody's free content, and many people do have tons of free content on there. So check it out. It's kind of like a Netflix for alternative media, and I'm sure many of you guys know, but tons of great content creators and people in the alternative media world are there. So just by signing up, you end up supporting everybody that's on there, and you can tip us on there and all that stuff. So it's a convenient way of supporting content creators you like. So that's awesome. And I'm also planning on putting my whole Ripple Effect podcast archives on there, and I'll have that as free content. I'll just post it there as just one more place to have it, because I like to have it as many places as possible. That way, if I get kicked off YouTube, it's still on Float, it's still on Odyssey, it's still on BitChute. So it's just, I think the more the merrier in regards to getting the content out there. And of course, the Ripple Effect Podcast also has a merch store, the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. Please get some merch, support the show that way if you can. I believe that's it. Enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks very much for being with us. You're the only, like we were talking about before, you're the only person who's been on all 4 shows. So I highly recommend you guys checking out his appearances on Tinfoil Hat Podcast. I believe that was probably the first out of the 4 you're on. And then you were on Midnight Mike's OBDM show. You were on Charlie Robinson's show, Macroaggressions, not too long ago, and now you're finally on this show, and you're kind of doing your rounds. I've seen you on a lot of different shows. You're killing it, which is awesome. It's nice that podcasts can help out with content creators. You know, often I do that with like the Union of Unwanted, or just kind of if there's somebody that I think is putting out good work and isn't getting the exposure they deserve, I'll like give them some contact information, like, hey, hit up these guys, hit up that guy. So it's cool how friendly and you know how the community really feels like a community in regards to helping each other.
This community really opened up to me. I mean, like we're like a family on Twitter, basically. You know, it's like everybody is so supportive of everybody else's work. I randomly hit Sam up a while ago when I was emailing random people, and he's like, sure, let's have you on. That's opened a bunch of doors for me. He's a gem. You know, it's been thrilled. He brought me on Union of the Unwanted, and like you said, I've done all 4 of the shows. I'm just trying to get this information out. Like my motivation is pure with this. Like I just want to teach people this, and then I want them to get my books and read it, because I go deeper into it in the books. What I've done is I've written a series of 6 thrillers, much like Dan Brown Da Vinci Code type stuff, where like there's anagrams and cryptograms, but instead of that, they're Bible verses that they have to decode with astrology. So it's been really well. My publicist right now has my books at a couple of movie producers, and we're just waiting to see where that happens. And he has my first 3 books in digital, and he's reading them, and we're just going to take it from there in April. But hopefully I can get like a Netflix miniseries out of this.
Yeah, I've heard you, you know, on all these shows and many other shows. I know you're on like Rogue Ways and stuff like that. And this stuff is super fascinating. I've had Marty Leeds on. I think he's probably the closest to somebody who kind of looks at the same type of stuff you look at. Jay Dyer also, you know, that occult. I was so mad that I missed that occult episode.
I know. I hit you up right after. I was like, dude, where the hell were you? And you were, but no. Hold on a second. For everybody that's listening, my man over here, Ricky, did a really good thing for his wife that day. So all the props in the world. I know where you're coming from with that stuff.
Yeah, well, you know, turning 40 for women is a big deal. Well, turning every age for women is a big deal, but once you hit like 30 or once you hit 40, it's like those are huge milestones. So actually that episode helped with, so she said she always wanted a surprise birthday party. That episode actually helped with the surprise, because she knows like my schedule is pretty on point in regards to the Union of the Unwanted. It's every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And so she assumed I had a show. So she, you know, she thought I had a show. She had no idea that she was being thrown a party. So pretending I was going to be, well, the episode actually did happen. So actually having a scheduled episode only helped with the whole thing. But I ended up listening to it with a little bit of a buzz when I got back home. At the end of the night, I listened to the whole episode, which I actually think with the buzz helped with like kind of diving deeper into some of these topics. But it was a really interesting discussion. A lot of you know, just interesting people with conflicting opinions on certain things, which I love. Like I love that aspect of it. I was in so Sam, Mike, and Charlie are you know, we kind of usually throughout the Union of Unwanted and during the week or whatever, we kind of stay connected and talk. And then sometimes during the show we'll talk and you know, like, oh, this guy's killing it, or you know, oh, let's cut it here or whatever. And somebody wrote like, oh, shit's getting, you know, a little heated or whatever. And I'm like, fuck, what's going on the show? I'm like, I can't wait to get home and listen to it. So once I got to that part, it was, well, I knew Hotep would be a part of something to do with it, because he's one thing I love about him. And I love the fact that the union of the unwanted, I don't want it to be an echo chamber. You know, I don't want, and speaking of,
Right.
you know, we have merch now if somebody wants to get some merch, but if you, you know, I don't want it to be an echo chamber. I don't want it to be just people just kind of all agreeing with one another. Like a little pushback is important, because one thing I've found with my own journey is that when people challenge my ideas and I'm forced to have to defend them, it really forces me to acknowledge if I thought it out or not. You know, like have I really thought it out, or did I just pick a team and I'm defending that team? So I think it's important, and that's how you learn. You know, you learn in most cases. You learn the most when you're talking to people you disagree with. You know,
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
yeah. So that was
Absolutely.
I highly recommend checking out, you know, your past appearances on those other shows, but definitely the Union of Unwanted, the cult episode, guys. If you haven't listened to it, please check it out. It was a really fascinating conversation, and obviously there's some connection to that and the stuff we're going to be talking about today, the cult stuff and symbolism and that type of stuff. So yeah, so don't let me hold you up. Let's get into. Do you want to get into how you got into this? Like what got you down that initial rabbit hole?
So I moved to Boston in 2012, 2013 with an ex I'm no longer with for a new job. I'm from Long Island, and I moved to Boston. That's why in my books, the kids are from Boston, and it talks about a lot of Boston stuff. Basically, the iPad had just come out, and we didn't have a lot of friends, so she would be watching TV at home. I'd be on the iPad going down rabbit holes, and I came across a guy named Jordan Maxwell, and I started watching his stuff, and his stuff just really blew my mind, and that led me to Santos Bonacci, and then I realized that this stuff was the truth. This was the truth behind everything. At least to me, it was. And I wanted to dedicate my life to it. And I just had an aha moment where I knew this is what I had to do. And I had an interesting take on it too, because I had a writing background. You know, I have an English degree, and what I basically did was I wrote these thrillers that uncovered this information, and it's been received incredibly well so far. It's moved very, very fast. That doesn't say that I didn't go into a lot of rejection. Like, I wrote the first book in 2013. It took me till 2017, 2018 to get an agent, and then another 2 years to get a book deal. But I finally did it, and I have a 6-book deal. But this stuff that I'm going through right now is like 95% my own work, and just wanted to basically teach people. So I'm going to bring you into this. I'm going to ask you some questions off of it, and then you just tell me what you think, and we'll just have a conversation and stuff. But just to jump into it, basically, if I were to ask you what the oldest, let's say, form of communication or writings that there were on Earth, what would you say they are?
That's a good question. You're dealing with the idiot in regards to this stuff. Religion was one of the. This is why I'm super fascinated with what we're going to discuss today, because religion, I think, for many of, or at least in my experience, was one of those things. It was one of the first conspiracies I really dove deep into, because I was raised Catholic. I'm Portuguese. You know, like a lot of Portuguese people raised Catholic. And then you rebel, you know, like I became this atheist where I'm just like, oh, religion doesn't make any sense. They don't let you ask questions. And then eventually I realized, oh shit, the atheist group is just as extreme as the Catholics.
Well, the atheists are usually, to me, I feel like the atheists are just a reaction to religion as opposed to their own cognitive process, which brings them to a thought period that allows them to say, okay, God doesn't exist. I mean, I believe in God. I just don't believe in religion. There's a difference. I believe in a creator. I just don't pursue the thought process that I understand it. I don't pretend to understand it. I think that, you know, in string theory and M theory, you know, in quantum theory, in quantum physics, you have 11 dimensions. You know, we don't even know what's going on in the third one. We don't know what dark matter or dark energy is, let alone that's like 90% of the world. Sorry.
Well, yeah, that's all right. But well, you're absolutely right. That's the thing, is like people have to I mean, I think sometimes like we just kind of accept reality for what it is. Everything we see, hear, smell, that's our reality, but that's not the limits of reality. Obviously,
No.
we're limited based on our senses, but
Right.
you know, it's almost like if we were a creature that didn't have a nose, like we would think sense didn't exist. If we
Exactly.
were a creature that didn't have ears, we wouldn't think that sound exists. So you know, we're limited to our senses, and that's why, like, the thing I appreciated with religion as I got older is that it asks those bigger questions. Like so I, in many cases, and you're an East Coaster like I am. I actually have family in Long Island and Smithtown. And, but yeah, I mean, you look at the East Coasters, New Yorkers, people from Massachusetts, Connecticut, we live very fast paced lives. It's constantly go, 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 go. It's like, you never really take time to like sit back, reflect, think. I mean, you were in a situation where you had time on your hands, so you went down these rabbit holes. But most people, especially before 2020, like they just were busy all the time, never stopped to think much more than the material world.
Right.
So the thing about like growing up as a Catholic, I rebelled against it because I didn't like I was always a super curious person. That's why I do the podcast. I wrote music. I loved writing. It kind of forced me to ask questions. I loved philosophy. And then, you know, uh, you were like, oh, religion, organized religion, they don't ask questions. They're telling you that they have the answers, that they know the answers. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. How can you be sure of these things? So, and then when you join the atheist group, it's same thing. Like they're just telling you they have the opposite answer, but they're telling you that they have the answer, that they know for sure
Right.
there is no. So I'm like, okay, this is all extreme, and none of these people are being honest. And as time goes by, like I started looking at the difference between atheism and then people who are religious. Even, and I have friends that are Muslim, friends that are Christians, all different types of religion. The one thing they all have in common is that their religion, even, obviously, and you know much more about the history of it than I do, but they all ask bigger questions, like what's the meaning of all this? What's our purpose? Like, which I think that in many cases, maybe somebody like yourself or me, like we might ask those questions just because we're curious people. But the average person, if they didn't go to church on Sunday, didn't have somebody that, that they felt like was intelligent or they respected, to tell them like, hey, like love your neighbor, think about how you're going to be treated in the afterlife. All I mean, just that alone will make you think about the afterlife, which is something that most of us neglect. We never think about death until we're at a funeral, most of the time. So I think that, there are benefits in regards to, being spiritual or being religious, because it kind of helps us break away from like just seeing things at the surface level. Is that what kind of do you have a similar kind of background in regards to your relationship with religion and
Yeah, I was raised religious. And I never took to it. And I always had these. I was. I never took to it ever since the youngest age that I can remember. I was raised conservative Jewish, and my parents are very religious. But an interesting thing happened when I was 9 years old. I had a kid move into the neighborhood who I'm almost best friends with to this day, my friend Paul, and his family are born again Christians. So I was exposed to that side early on. And it didn't really so much as show me like a different side as it made me think, well, who's right? Someone's got to be right, because obviously someone's got to be right at that age. Turns out neither of them are right, and the questions that I go through in my PowerPoint right here are going to help people understand a little bit more about what the Bible truly is. So, but like I was asking before, I guess, what if you were to say the oldest writings on Earth, what would you say they were? If you just had to throw something out there.
I don't know, the Dead Sea Scrolls or something like that?
Something, okay, so something like that, maybe the Sumerians, maybe the
Yeah.
Egyptians. It's actually the Lascaux Caves, which is 40,000 years old. What happened was there are these caves in France that people went into. Okay. And when they went into the back, they saw things like this on the wall. You see the bull, you see the lion, you see the horse. Okay. And in astrology, you know that the bull is Taurus, the lion is Leo, and the horse is Sagittarius. It's just missing the guy with the bow and the arrow. And what you would have to do when you went into the back and see this is, well, you would acknowledge it for starters. But what they did was they carbon dated this, and they found that it was about 40,000, maybe plus minus 5,000. And the carbon dating. And there's a lot of people out there, a lot of Christians out there and such, that say carbon dating is kind of bullshit. Well, it's kind of true. Carbon dating is kind of bullshit, but up to 50,000 years, it's quite accurate. But when you start to get into the 100,000 years or the millions of years, it is not so accurate. Carbon 14 is not as accurate. But up to 50,000 years is pretty solid. So these came out to about 40,000 years. And what they did was they brought in an astronomer, okay, on a whim with a computer. And he rewound the sky back, because we have computer programs that could do this. Jesus. That's my wife, by the way. She's a duck in my phone. So basically, they brought an astronomer in and a computer program. And what they did was they rewound the sky back and they printed out what they saw. And they superimposed it over this. And behold, the Taurus, the bull, where that was located was where Taurus was. The lion was where Leo was. The horse was where Sagittarius was. The ram was where Aries was. All these animals were where they were located. So 40,000 years ago, we had a working understanding of the zodiac.
That's so wild. I've heard you talk about this on another podcast. I remember it blew my mind when you said that. Like, just, I mean, do you think it was because it was the only? I think it was Charlie who said it when you were talking to him. He said that because, or maybe you said it, but I know it was during your conversation with Charlie Robinson about how it was like one of the only permanent things. You know, so it's like it's almost like knowledge and information that can be used over generations and decades and
Yeah.
centuries because it was permanent. The stars, the skies, like that was permanently, you know, there. So if you learn that, you know, that's knowledge that can be given for forever.
Well, go back 40,000 years, okay? Those are supposed to be hunters and gatherers, right? These are supposed to be hunters and gatherers. And you go back 40,000 years and you realize that they only have, you realize all they had was the stars to look at. You know, they didn't really have forms of entertainment. They didn't have watches, clocks. The reason this is so important and the reason the Bible is filled with this kind of stuff covertly and hidden is because it's a way of understanding the stars. You have to understand is that if we went back 40,000 years and me and you were in hunter-gatherer times, right, finding God would be low on that list. What you would need to do is you would need to know how to survive. You need to know when the sun comes up so that you can go out into public, because at night all the animals come out and it's dangerous. You'd have to get out of the fucking food chain, which we were still in. You'd have to just a million things. You need to know the stars because you need to know when to plant. You need to know when to harvest. You need to know when winter was coming. You need to understand the stars. And there was no air pollution and there was no, you know, industrial pollution. There was none of that stuff. So you could see the sky is completely clear. And what you would need to do was chart that. And you would need to make a calendar for yourself. And that's what they use. They use this as a calendar. But it translates into the Bible, into a bunch of questions, which I'm sure you had growing up, okay? Like this, how Jesus was able to heal the blind, how he walked on water, how he turned water into wine, why he had 12 disciples, why he was betrayed with a kiss by Judas, why he was dead for 3 days, why his birthday is on December 25th. All this is astrology, and I'm going to get into that. Genesis 1:14. This is what this is all about that we were just talking about. Let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, dates, and the years. What they don't tell you is that the Bible is full of encoded astrology, okay, that is hidden beneath the layer. And that's basically about it. So what I need to do is I need to go over the first 12, well, not the first, but I need to go over the 12 signs of the zodiac to tell you what to look for. Okay, because each sign has things that you look for within it when you're reading the Bible. If I were to tell you that they mentioned the word ram, you would know that that's Aries, the ram. Okay, but there's also other things to look into. So do you have any questions before I just dive right into this?
No, not really. I'm kind of just really intrigued with just learning about this stuff.
Oh, it gets great, man. I promise you. So the first sign is Aquarius that I talk about. The first sign in the zodiac is actually Aries. It's the spring. That's the first sign of the zodiac, and it ends in Pisces. But I talk about Aquarius first. The first sign is Aquarius, which is represented by the man with the water pitcher. Okay. I don't need to get into the story of Zeus and Aquarius, but basically just know that Aquarius comes from, it's a Greek story. Okay. Pisces is the sign of the two fish in the water. Aries is the ram. In Aries, you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day, 12-hour night. It's also the Passover, or it's also known as the Passover for the Jews. The Jews' Passover is always in Aries. Or in Astrotheology, it's the passing over of the sun over the equator. See, in the Jewish religion, the Passover is God passing over Egypt and smiting the firstborn Egyptian kids. Okay? which was the last, what do you call it? It was kind of the last plague out of the 10 plagues. Basically what happens is the sun's on its way to the height in the summer solstice. In Christianity, the passing over is changed, and it's now called the resurrection of God's son. And Ram, the Aries. That's why the Jews are the people of Aries. They became prevalent when the Bible was written. That was the time of Aries. We're in the age of Aquarius, but that was the age of Aries. So it's why the Jews smeared the lamb's blood on the door to protect them from God, because they're the people of Aries. It's why they had a lamb shank bone on their Passover plate, because they're the people of Aries. It's why they blow the freaking ram's horn to the sky, because they're the people of Aries. Then you have Taurus, which is the bull. And when you look at the sky and you see the Taurus during the right season, it's as above, so below. So you know when you see the bull in the sky, you have to put the plow on the bull on Earth so that you could plant the seeds. So this is part of the calendar we were just talking about. You'd see the bull and you would know that this is planting season. Taurus is planting season. Then Gemini is the twins. It's the story of Castor and Pollux Troy, whose sister was Helen of Troy, which is the story of Achilles that everybody who knows their mythology knows about. Then Cancer is the crab. It's the sideways moving creature, just as the sun does. What the sun does is, starting December 25th, it rises a degree on its axis every single day until it hits the height of June 21st, which is the highest height that the sun goes on its axis. For 3 days after, it stays at that height. And then on June 25th, it drops a degree. And then it will continue to drop a degree until it hits December 21st. When it hits December 21st, it's the winter solstice. That's basically known as the sun is dead, because it's the lowest point that it rises on. Then it stays at that low height for 3 days. So that's why God's son was dead for 3 days. And then it comes back to life December 25th, and it comes back to life. That's the birth of Jesus. That's the birth of Dionysus. That's the birth of Tammuz. That's the birth of Horus. You can go on. You know, they all have the December 25th birth. So Cancer is the crab because it moves sideways, just as the sun moves sideways for the 3 days. Then Leo is the king, which is the king of the jungle. Everybody knows that. The ruling planet of Leo is actually the sun. So when you're talking about God in its kingdom, or God in its heaven, or Jesus in his kingdom, I should say, they're talking about the sun in Leo. Then Virgo, as you see on the right, is the woman holding the wheat stalk. So remember before when you were saying that you plant in Taurus? Well, you plant in Taurus, and then the virgins would cultivate the wheat in Virgo in order to make bread for the year. Okay, so that's why it's the woman with the wheat stalk. Libra is the justice. It's the scales. It's the balance. It's the just one. The reason it's justice is because it judges God's sun as it passes over the fall equinox and begins its descent into winter, into cold, into death. The Jews always celebrate their new year around the fall equinox. And being that Libra is justice, the scales, the balance, the just one, the judgment, that's why in Libra, Rosh Hashanah is the new year. And then 8 days later, you have something called Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And it's when the Jews fast all day and they beg God to keep them in the book of life for the next year. That's what they do. And Libra is also wine season. So you plant the grapes in Taurus, okay? And then you can press the wine in Libra. So Virgo is the bread and Libra is the wine. That's the bread and the wine. Then Scorpio is the scorpion, and he's known as the betrayer. When a scorpion bites you, it leaves an imprint in your skin that looks like 2 lips. It's why the mafia has the kiss of death, and it's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with a kiss. You know, he didn't point him out. He didn't throw a rock at him. He betrayed him with a kiss. So the sun is judged in Libra and betrayed in Scorpio. And then finally in Sagittarius, you have the horseman with the bow and the arrow that inflicts further punishment on the sun and finally kills it. In the Bible, it's translated as a spear going into the side of God's son. You know, and we went over this. In Sagittarius, you have December 21st. That's the death. So whenever they're talking about a death in the Bible, they're talking about Sagittarius. Okay? Good. And then Capricorn, if you picture the zodiac wheel, Capricorn's at the bottom. And what happens is it's the goat because it starts to climb up the mountain. The sun walks along the signs and it starts at the bottom, and the bottom is Capricorn, so it starts to climb up the mountain. So do you have any questions based on those, or you should, that's pretty much like a good jump off point to know what you need to look at to decode.
No, I mean, I'm glad you kind of went. Have you ever watched the very first Zeitgeist movie when he kind of talks about how all these stories are similar and how they're all kind of retold over and over again, and talks about the sun being the god and the all that stuff.
Oh yeah, hold on a sec, I just lost my video.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, if anybody's ever gone back or haven't watched that,
the original Zeitgeist movie was very, very informative, but it was also very, very incomplete. He didn't go into it quite like I go into it.
Yeah, well, I think his point of it, because he gets some, he got a lot of pushback from religious scholars and religious people in general. But I mean, the point of that film wasn't just to specifically hit on those topics. Like you focus just on these topics, which I think is awesome. Yeah, I think he kind of went through it kind of quickly, and then he also went into like September 11th and war propaganda and all that type of stuff. I think it was more about like just kind of showing how things like that have been used to control the masses, to control the population.
Absolutely. And it was a good jump off point. I'm not going to lie. It's a good thing to watch to get people warmed up. But I'm hoping that something like what I'm doing is going to replace it because it's much more gentle.
Yeah. And the thing with you is like, just hearing you on interviews, like you don't have a agenda. You don't put anybody down. You don't.
I really don't have an agenda. Like, yes, yeah. I have a publicist. Yes, I have a book deal. And yes, I am trying to get this on Netflix, but I'm just trying to introduce this to the masses. I just have what people who do what I do, because there are astrotheologists out there, okay? The difference between me and them is I think I have a mainstream crossover thing going on here. I think that this can cross over with the book series and teaching people this kind of information, whereas other people just teach the information. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what I meant by in general, how like sometimes you know that like they're talking about this because they have a Christian slant to it, or they have a Jewish slant to it, or they try to basically push some type. It almost seems like you're just like, here's the information, the way I've analyzed it and the things I've uncovered, and then you decide what to do with it, like, or so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, understanding just these type of questions and then really seeing how intelligent our ancestors were. I mean, that's something that I think has been a myth with like technology and all this stuff. We look at our primitive ancestors as just dumb cavemen. But
there's actually a word for that. It's actually called chronological ethnocentrism, which basically says, it's the theory that basically says we're the furthest along in time, therefore we're the smartest. And that's just blatantly not true.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we've uncovered like things like you've uncovered where it's like, oh crap, like there's examples that they knew this before we knew it, or some of this wisdom has been lost. I mean, look at like example I use all the time is like the saying I have a gut feeling, right? Like just now has it become kind of more accepted that the gut could be like the second brain and could have.
Oh yeah, there have the most serotonin comes from your gut. That's why you get butterflies when you feel good.
Yeah. And so that's something that people have been saying for a while, and we didn't even realize that there was a connection there, a scientific connection. I think sometimes they understood things, but they didn't understand the why or how, maybe,
right.
And because of that, we kind of like poo-pooed it. And now we looking back as we discover more things, we're like, oh shit, they actually understood this. They just didn't, know why or how. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting, these bigger questions and helping kind of, I say it all the time on the show, how life's about like trying to get, like life's a giant puzzle, and it's about like trying to gather as many puzzle pieces as possible.
Yep.
knowing by the end of your journey, you're not going to have all the puzzle pieces together, but
And being okay with that.
yeah, but also hoping that you can keep searching and you gather enough where you at least have somewhat of an understanding of things. And so I think all these things
There
are
we go.
really important, so it's so yeah, let's continue.
Okay, great. Okay, so so you got to think about the names that you were taught as a kid for God, for Jesus, I should say. Now, Capricorn is the goat. When the sun is in Capricorn, he's called the scapegoat of Israel. When the sun is in Aquarius, he's known as the son of man, which is the man with the water pitcher. Pisces, the two fish, he's the fisherman of men. It's also why he feeds the masses with two fish. In Aries, he's the Lamb of God. In Leo, he's the Lion of Judah. The lady holding the stalk of wheat, Virgo, he's born of a virgin and he's known as the bread of life. In Libra, you have the scales of justice. He's known as the just one. Then he's betrayed in Scorpio, dies in Sagittarius on December 21st. And it's also why he's worshipped on the Sunday. Now, look at this picture to the left of Jesus. This is like your standard picture of Jesus, right? That you would find. There's some anomalies with it that we're going to talk about. The sun is always behind Jesus because Jesus represents the sun. You can look at any gods that have ever been, hieroglyphed or written or pictures of. They always have the sun behind their head because that's what they represent. The two fingers up like this is an ancient Kemetic peace sign. It's they're together. It's the togetherness, which is why he has it, which is why Baphomet has it, Satan has it, Lucifer has it. They're all like that. Come on, woman. Basically, this is the peace sign, supposedly, right? But it's the separation. This is an ancient British war sign. It's the V for victory. Okay. Now, the white Jesus picture is actually Caesar Borgia, the bastard son of Pope Alexander VI. Before then, there was no picture of him, and it was decided his picture would be the face of. So if you were to Google pictures of Caesar Borgia, who is the son of Pope Alexander VI in the 1500s, you would find a couple things. You would find that the faces are identical. Okay, so that's where the face comes from. Number two, that's why he's white, is because Caesar Borgia was white. And then the other thing that you would also find is that around the 1500s, when he was the Pope, that's when the printing press came around and they were able to distribute this picture widely. So it's not like Muhammad where you're not allowed to draw him. This is just, there was no picture of Jesus beforehand. So the crown of thorns wrapped around his heart at the bottom, okay, that represents the rays of the sun. Jesus has the crown of thorns that represents the sun rays. And the heart outside the body, because the heart is always outside the body in pictures of Jesus, represents the heart's toroidal field. I'm sure you've talked about it before, you know about it. It's an electromagnetic gradient that comes out of your heart that reaches 6 feet outside of your body. That's why the elites are trying to keep you 6 feet apart right now, is because when you're next to somebody, okay, when you're within 6 feet of somebody, your hearts are communicating. You're communicating energies. You just can't see it. And we don't have anything that basically measures it yet. But you've seen like pictures of people's auras before, right? Yeah, that's where it comes from. So if we start to go decoding into verses, which is the fun stuff, okay? Have you heard of Proverbs 16:18? Have you heard, I'm sure, because you've been in church, have you heard of pride comes before the fall?
Yep.
What would you take that to mean?
Well, I have an unfair advantage of hearing you on many episodes, so I know the answer.
All right, so then I'll just read it then. So this is taken to mean the downfall of your ego. Your ego will be your downfall. However, a group of lions is called a pride. Pride is the lion. Lion is Leo. Leo's in July and August. That comes before the fall. In the book of Micah, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. However, Bethlehem is 2 words in Hebrew, bet, which means house, and lechem, which means bread. So that's the house of bread. This is Virgo with the wheat stalk, the virgin. So the Savior will come from a virgin. That's how this stuff is encoded.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's amazing how when you're discovering all this stuff and you're connecting all these dots and making sense of all this. I mean, do do you feel like there's something more there than just like because some of this stuff's actually pretty literal, like you said, like the Leo coming before the fall and stuff like that? Or do you think that there's even deeper meaning in some of this stuff, or deeper purposes?
What do you mean?
Well, because like for example, like some of the stuff, it's like, okay, this means that, that means that. So it seems like they're just a lot of the stuff. It was just like there wasn't. It's not like they were hiding anything conspiratorial or secretive, or a lot of the stuff was like just kind of understanding the world around them. Did you find anything that was kind of more secretive, or anything that you think that wasn't?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that. I'm gonna show you that there's clearly astrology in the Bible, and I'm going to show you why it's being hidden. But I'm going to read you a verse from Deuteronomy. Now, I went over the 12 signs with you, so you know what to look for when you're talking about like wheat or wine or judgment or law or virgin or ram or bull, right? So I'm going to read you this, and you're going to tell me how many that you see just hidden in plain sight, okay? Good. He gave them honey from the cliffs and olive oil from the rocky ground. He gave his people butter from the herd and milk from the flock. He gave them lambs and goats. They had the best rams from Bashan and the finest wheat. They drank the best wine made from the juice of red grapes. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull.
Okay.
So you see how many signs they're just openly talking about there?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you two more that you haven't seen. He gave them honey from the cliffs. In the sign Cancer, there's a group of stars called the Beehive Cluster. Okay? It's an asterism. It's why the bees are very important to the Illuminati, is because of this. And it goes back to the Bible. So the bees is honey, and that's in Cancer. Makes sense, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then you have the milk from the flock and butter from the herd. That's milk-based. That comes from the Milky Way galaxy, whose center is in Sagittarius. So the land from Cancer to Sagittarius would be that great land of milk and honey.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, their understanding of the world is just it's like you can see it in these writings. Like they just just even knowing what is the Milky Way and all this stuff. I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah.
It's great.
How deep down the rabbit hole of like Graham Hancock's work have you gone down in regards? Because he has an interesting take in regard, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. Like he has this interesting take. Like we think that like we go from monkeys to man, and it's like this straight kind of like graph that slowly goes up, and we just slowly become more intelligent and more intelligent and more intelligent, and then eventually we get to present.
No, I don't think it does that. I mean, we're self-aware, and we have such a higher level consciousness that we had to have been tinkered with. It's interesting too, because I talk about this. Have you heard of chromosome 2 in our bodies?
I've heard of it, but I'm not too familiar with what it is.
Chromosome 2 is our second chromosome. It's 35% larger than the others. And if you look at it before, you know how like a chromosome is like horseshoed?
Yeah.
In the middle of it, it's fused together, like it had been tinkered with, like there had been some master geneticists that have worked on it.
Well, that's it. Yeah, well, Graham has this interesting take that he thinks, and it kind of makes sense. Like we like to think that we go from like the start to the finish, or to current times, and it's just a straight shot, and nothing happened in between in regards to civilization's ending. But you look at like just the story of Atlantis, or whatever, the pyramids, like all these pieces or these theories that possibly we evolved, we became very intelligent, and then something happened. Like there was a bump in the road. There was either a meteor or something, like civilization ended and kind of had to restart again. And then some of the knowledge and wisdom from past.
It typically happens every 12 to 14,000 years.
So you do believe that could be the case in regard?
100%. Look at the Sphinx.
Yeah, the Sphinx is.
Graham talks about this, doesn't he? He talks about how the back of it is water eroded.
Yeah, he had actually experts that went there, because a lot of the thing about a lot of these experts, the experts that fight with him, is that they're very they're stuck in their ideology, and what's that saying? Like when your paycheck requires you to believe something or not believe something, that's what you're going to do. Like these guys are experts in these fields, these experts in Egyptian history or these type of fields, and then if they acknowledge that Graham's right, in many cases it's like a blow to their ego. Like, oh,
It's not just a blow to their ego. You got to understand it has to fit the narrative, because the Bible's, all the holy books say that the earth is only about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. When you find out that the Sphinx has been water eroded on the back, and the last time there was water in that part of the area was during the melting of the last ice age.
exactly.
And another thing that you'll find too is the Sphinx is a lion. Okay. And the last time there was water there was 12,000 years ago. Well, if you rewind the clocks back 12,000 years ago, the Sphinx would have been facing the constellation Leo.
I did not know that.
It would have been facing the constellation Leo, and it would make sense for that because the pyramids were built to line up with Orion's belt. Okay, so it's all stars. It all has to do with the stars. And the reason it's encoded in the Bible is because this is the ancient science that they needed. It's only in modern times that we've had calendars and this, that, and the other thing. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, when they see this kind of stuff, they would be able to decode it. They would be able to know what it is. And before 325 AD, where Constantine unified everything under a literal Christianity, and then everything started, they started going and raping and pillaging and converting people, because that's how they did it. People were reading the Bible. Those who could read were reading the Bible like this. They knew the signs. I'm going to go through a couple more.
Yeah.
Revelation 4:7. So we did the Old Testament. Well, we started with the Old Testament. Now we're in the New Testament. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man, and the fourth was like an eagle. Okay? The first living creature was like a lion, Leo. The second was like an ox. That's Taurus. The third had a face like a man. That's Aquarius, the sign of the man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. In astrology, the scorpion is the belly-crawling creature. It's the lowest form of life on Earth. Its evolved form is the eagle, and the eagle's further evolved form is the phoenix. You've heard of that UFC fighter Khabib?
Yeah.
Nurmagomedov? Do you know what his nickname is?
Oh, isn't it the eagle? They call
him the flying eagle. He's a Scorpio.
Yeah.
Okay. Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. That's these four signs are the four fixed signs of the zodiac. You have things in astrology called mutable signs, cardinal signs, fixed signs. What this does is you have the zodiac wheel, right? The solstices and the equinox form a cross through it. It's the perfect cross of God's sun. These four signs form an X like this through the cross. It's a perfect alignment. So these were not chosen by accident. In Revelation 12, have you heard of the woman and the dragon?
Yes. Yeah.
A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. A woman clothed with the sun is the sun metaphorically in Virgo. It's clothed in Virgo. If the sun is in Virgo, the moon will be at her feet, right? If the sun is out, then the moon will be under it. And then when the sun goes down, the moon comes up, right? Okay. Another sign appears in heaven, an enormous dragon. The constellation Draco on the left. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. That's just a metaphor for what it is. The constellation Draco is the dragon. Its tail goes from Aries to Sagittarius, which is 4/12 of the sign, or 1/3 of the stars out of the sky. They're just metaphors. That's all this is. This is not to be taken literally. In fact, the people that wrote the Bible would probably have gone apeshit if they knew that we were taking it literally now.
Have you looked into some of the stuff that was banned from the Bible? Because some people don't know that there was more than 4 gospels. And
I've decoded Revelation. I've decoded the Book of Enoch, which I can come back on with you if you're interested in it. I could do the Book of Enoch. It's the same thing. All these gospels that are not in the Bible can be decoded the same way. All these gospels were written the exact same way.
Do you have, I can assume, but what's your theory on why some of these gospels weren't a part of the Bible?
Yeah, because they talk about astrology in plain sight as opposed to being encoded.
So you think that was a big motivation, was just keeping this wisdom and this knowledge from the average,
Absolutely,
I guess.
100%.
So so the goal was to make it difficult enough where only somebody who was more intelligent could kind of figure this
No,
stuff out.
originally it was written so that people could figure this kind of stuff out. But what happened was after 325, they took a literal approach to it.
Interesting.
So
Yeah, this is.
let's go into a longer passage. Okay, are you familiar with the book of Job?
Yeah, I know the name.
So Job was a righteous guy, and then Satan made a bet with God. To shorten the story, Satan made a bet with God, and he said, if you start taking stuff away from him, he'll curse you. God said, I'll take that bet. He said to the devil, or to Satan, you can do whatever you want to him, you just can't take his life. So he starts losing things one by one, and then he finally screams out to God, why is this happening to me? God responds. I'm going to read to you God's response. So Job 38:32, he says, can you lead forth the Mazzaroth? It's important to know that the Mazzaroth right off the bat literally means the zodiac. It literally means the zodiac. Okay, over time, Mazzaroth becomes Mazalot, which survives in Judaism today as Mazel Tov. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that word.
Mm-hmm.
Or good fortune from the stars. It's important to know, too, that Job is the oldest book of the Bible. Genesis is not. Job is the oldest book of the Bible. So what's the Lord's challenge to Job? He says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or can you loosen Orion's belt? Those are metaphors, but they're openly, obviously talking about it, right? Then he says, can you bring forth the constellation in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? The constellations are the zodiac above. The bear and its cubs are Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, part of the Big Dipper. Then he says, who can tip over the water jars of heaven? That's Aquarius, the man with the water pitcher. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? That's Leo. Who provides food for the raven? That's the constellation Corvus, which means raven and borders on Virgo. Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Mriga, meaning deer, is located in Orion. Who let the wild donkey go free? That's Acellus Borealis, which means donkey, and is located in Cancer. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? That's Taurus. The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully. That's Lambda Achille, or Alpha Liman, which means two ostriches in Arabic. Do you give the horse its strength? It laughs of fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against its side along with the flashing spear and lance. Remember earlier we were talking about the word spear? Okay, that's where it tells you Sagittarius, the bow and the arrow, is the spear. There's two important murders that happen in the Bible. Well, there's plenty, but there's the two most important would be Jesus, I think, and Cain and Abel. The first murder and the last murder, right? Okay, Jesus is attacked with a spear to his side to finally kill him. And Cain and Abel. Cain hits his brother with a rock. But do you know what the word Cain means in Hebrew?
I don't. I just know it's a WWE wrestler, Undertaker's brother.
Cain means spear.
Ah.
Right.
Well, it's funny how some of this stuff, like I know you talked about what was that Nicolas Cage movie that they used,
I do talk about that Face Off.
Face Off, and then you look at like WWE. I was kind of joking about Kane, but obviously that makes sense, being Undertaker's brother, naming him Kane. It was kind of a acknowledgement of some of this stuff. It's weird how probably many more people are into this than we're even aware of. They use references to this type of stuff. And
Speaking of wrestling, do you follow the Iron Sheik on Twitter?
I don't.
You have to. He's the funniest guy on Twitter.
Really?
He is so funny. I can't take it.
I've been trying to get, speaking of wrestling, I've been trying to get Kane on the show, also known as Glenn Jacobs, because
known as, he was Isaac Yankem too. He was DDS.
Oh, that was what, prior to him becoming Kane?
Yeah, he was the dentist. Remember, like?
Yes, the dentist. Yeah. I remember. Oh, what a fail that was. That was a horrendous. I mean, he fit Kane. I mean, I remember when we're gonna lose a lot of people on this wrestling talk, but I don't care. I never talk wrestling on here. I literally got into it again. You can thank 2020, because when all the sports ended and there was nothing on TV. I'm like, fuck it, let's get the WWE app and watch some old shit I grew up watching. I got out of it forever, And then I remember my wife's like, I could never get into this. And like a couple episodes in, next thing you know, I'm like, hey, you're following a lot of wrestlers on Instagram, and you're, and all this stuff. And next thing you know, now she's hooked. She's more hooked than I am. And
That's great.
well, it's fun because it's something I'm like, I could see as a kid being a Portuguese immigrant, like there's not a lot of things me and my parents could watch together that that we could all enjoy, because their lack of understanding of the language, the English language and whatnot. So the nice thing about wrestling was that it wasn't that hard to figure out like who is the good guys, who's the bad guys, and the storylines and all that stuff. So it was something we could kind of all enjoy as a family. And then with the kids, it's kind of similar. Like we can watch it now with the kids, and it's like, how many kid movies can we watch before we want to shoot ourselves? So it's like the nice thing about wrestling, like the adults enjoy it, the kids enjoy it. So it's like something I can see why so many people are so passionate about it, and why it's a big part even of my upbringing. Why I still have very good memories of it.
Are you from Portugal, or were you born here?
I was born in Portugal. I was born in Chaves.
My family goes back to Portugal. There's a town in Portugal called Chaves. I don't know if you've ever.
I was born in Chaves. Yeah.
That's my middle name. My family got kicked out in the 1400s, and it goes back to that. That's still my middle name.
Oh shit! Yeah, I was. That's actually. I'm not from Chaves. I'm nearby, but that's where I was born. It was the closest because we're from like a small little village, and that was like the closest hospital, the closest city like place.
It was it's my mom's last name, and because I'm a guy, and obviously I took my dad's last name, clearly, so she gave me it as a middle name, but that's how and my uncle had 3 daughters, so they weren't going to keep the name.
Yeah
But it goes back to that. It goes back to the Inquisition, so we could trace our family back to the 1400s in the town of Chaves.
Yeah, Portugal in general, the history of it's quite fascinating, and to me, I mean, it is one of those things where when you're Portuguese and you're from, or whatever country you're from, or whatever background you're from, like to me, it's fascinating diving into that history. And I mean, I think that's what makes history interesting in general. It's just the fact that you have a better understanding of today when you retrace your steps backwards and figure out how you got here. So but yeah, that's funny that your mom's maiden name is Chaves, and that's where I was born. People there are very so there's a soccer team, a Chaves soccer team. They're always in like the second division because I don't know if you know how soccer works, but if you're at the bottom of the first division, the last 3 teams, usually it's like last 2 or 3 teams go down to the second division. And even though they're usually a second division team, it's one of the most seen jerseys around, like Portuguese people will wear, because they're so proud of Chaves and just history there, and just that region of.
Next time you go, get me something.
Yeah, I can. You know what's funny? That's it's not hard to do around these neck of the woods because I'm from in Ludlow. It's right outside of like Springfield, Massachusetts. It's a huge Portuguese community. So like there's Portuguese stores, there's Portuguese butcher shops, there's Portuguese. You go to the liquor stores here, it's full of Portuguese wine. So when I go see my family in Long Island, it's quite common that like my family down here will bring them a bunch of Portuguese products. They'll bring them Portuguese cheese.
Dude, next time you come down to Long Island, hit me up.
I'm
in Nassau, so if you're talking Smithtown, that's 20 minutes away.
Yeah. We usually go from Port Jefferson. It can get a little expensive, but it does save a little bit of easier travels with.
You talking about the ferry?
Yeah, taking the ferry at Port Jefferson, because when you have kids, it's like being in a car for that many hours, it can be hard for all of us. But when you can get off out of your car, and you can, the kids enjoy being on the boat.
You just got to get 2 TVs in the back and just put wrestling on it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they could watch a Royal. Literally, we watch like every Royal.
Give them the old stuff. Give them like some good like Hogan stuff.
So last night so every night my son makes me sleep with him, and I of course willingly will, because I know it's just a matter of time before he doesn't want to hang out with dad anymore. So I'm going to milk this as long as I can.
There you go.
We watch soccer at night. Like we'll watch replays of soccer games that we missed, or we watch wrestling. So last night we ended up watching like the 95 Royal Rumble, but it's fun to go back, and it's fun that he even cares. Like why? Like he's watched so much WWE that he's become a 6-year-old WWE historian. Like he talks about they've gone so into it that my daughter, who's only 4, cries that she misses Ultimate Warrior. I'm like, you've never seen Ultimate Warrior wrestle.
Were
But
they even alive when he was alive? When did he die? Like 5 years ago now?
my daughter's 4. She's never seen him ever wrestle. She's never seen him alive, but she'll go back and watch the old ones, and then she's like, oh, where is he now? I'm like, oh, he passed away, and she'll cry. She's like, I miss Ultimate Warrior.
I kind of dropped off a little bit after Macho Man came out with his rap CD.
Macho Man came out with a rap CD?
Yeah, I'll send you some songs. It's absolutely horrible. He's like, Hulk Hogan, I'm coming for you. It's terrible.
Oh my god, that is so funny. That is, well, speaking of all these things we're talking about, I mean, Austin 316, right? I mean, that's well, is there is there any hidden secrets in that?
Yeah, John 3:16 is for God loved earth so much that he gave, or his people so much, he gave him his only begotten son. That's SON. Okay, but it's actually the sun. He gave the sun to the world so that everybody could have life. That's what it means.
Yeah, that's.
Oh my God, we could talk about wrestling forever, but let me continue with this.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about AEW because my kids have gotten really into AEW of late, and it reminds me of ECW back in the day, and I was a big ECW guy. I love
like Tommy Dreamer, like when it was like legit.
Yeah, Rob Van Dam, Sabu, not when WWE took it and kind of ruined it, but before that, when Taz and all that stuff, and the Sandman and that was crazy. But AEW is like gone to the point, because that's the thing, when you become such a big organization like WWE, they're so limited with what they can do because they've been sued so many times. So like you can't take headshots anymore. Not that, I mean, obviously I don't want the guys to get hurt. I don't want any athlete or any entertainer slurring their words later in their life for our entertainment. But it was like there's something about, like, I have such respect for, and it sounds silly because people who don't watch it don't understand how tough these guys are. I have such respect for, like, you look at like some of those old Hell in a Cell or the TLC matches or whatever, where these guys
like Mankind and Undertaker.
Oh my God, when he got thrown off the cage, or even Triple H. I mean, Triple H was in some legendary battles. I mean, and just the blood and all the stuff, and you did it all for the storyline. You did it all.
Yeah.
It's not like being a professional athlete where, like, if you get injured, you're like, okay, you're subbed out, and then you go get looked at by professionals. Like, these guys care so much about, like, the show must go on, that regardless what type of injuries they have, they just fight through it. And that's why, I mean, it sounds silly, but I can kind of see why MMA fighters and wrestlers have respect for one another, because they're one of the few type of jobs that, like, you literally have to be mentally strong, and your pain threshold has to be.
I mean, Jesus, when Owen Hart dropped Austin on his head.
Yeah, and he had neck injuries. Did you ever hear this story about that? About how he actually had some doubts about, like, doing that move, and he's like, are you sure you're gonna do it or whatever? And what a tragic story, all that stuff. I've watched a couple of those documentary series. What was it? Actually, I knew you were into wrestling, now that I think of it, because I think you're wearing an NWO shirt when you were talking to a good friend of yours and a friend of mine from podcasting, Chrissy Mayer. And I think you're wearing, and I'm like, oh,
do you know that me and Chrissy go back to elementary school, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't know until I listened to that episode, and I remember when you appeared on there, and you guys literally grew up together. You were talking about, like, your high school and people you grew up with and all that shit. That's awesome, man. She's awesome. She's such a sweetheart. She's
great.
She's one of those people that she's super easy to talk to. You can talk to about anything and everything. And I mean, you see it on her show. She has, like, people like yourself that talk about much more serious research, and then she'll have a porn star on, and she can hold a conversation with everybody. It's like, that's a talent among itself.
What she's doing for porn stars to destigmatize them is she's the only one doing it. She's the only one doing it, and kudos for her for doing that. Honestly, I think it's an incredible thing what she's doing.
Yeah, I mean, in so many cases, like, it's like we look at them like they're like it's a creature we don't understand and we don't care to understand, and she makes them human and shows the human side of them, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Cool, man. All right, so should I just finish this up real quick?
Yeah, but anybody who's still listening after the WWE talk.
You're gonna get so much shit for that.
It's all right. This show goes. The beautiful thing about this show is that I rarely stay on script because I think people are so fascinating. Like I love meeting people, and I feel like there's so many layers to people. Like you could talk about one topic, but then while you're discussing things, like something else gets brought up, and you find out they're into something that you never knew they were into, and
Yeah.
you find out they're much more fascinating than you thought. So I love kind of just going wherever the conversation takes us, and the listeners are used to that. I mean, I've had people on to talk about one thing, and we'll go completely off the rails 5 minutes in, and just never talk about it.
All right, so let me go back to this. So where was I? Oh, here we go. Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? That's Aquila, which is a Latin name for eagle and is a constellation a few degrees above the celestial equator. His last thing is, can you pull in Leviathan with the fish hook? And that's the fish god Pisces. It's the fish god. So you look at God's response to Job. And if I were to read it, who provides food for the raven? Do you watch where the doe bears are fawn? Who let the wild donkeys go free? Well, it just sounds like animals. It just sounds like you're talking about animals. Like, do you have your animals in order? Which he didn't, because God took them all away from him. But basically, this is just talking about the stars. That's all this is. So there's questions here. How was Jesus able to heal the blind? Well, if he's the Son, S-O-N, of God, what happened was the blind man came in, Jesus touched him in the eyes with his 2 fingers, and he could see. However, if it's the Son, then what happens with the sun? The sun comes up when it's dark, and then suddenly it touches your eyes and you can see. You know, how he was able to walk on water. Have you ever seen a sunset on a lake before? The sun's literally walking on water. How he turned water into wine, it's a little more complicated, but God is considered a man, and Earth is considered a woman, Mother Earth. And the reason for that is because of God's sacred fluid. It's called shemen in Hebrew. We get the word semen from it. What happens is God's shemen rains on earth, and then you plow in Taurus, which is April showers bring May flowers. Everybody knows that. That's Taurus season. And then it rains and it rains and it rains, and then you get the grapes in Libra, and then you press them. That's how you turn the water into the wine, because originally it's just water, and then the grapes grow, and then you press them. That's how you turn water into wine. Why he had 12 disciples, that's one for each sign. We already went over the fact that Judas was Scorpio because he was the betrayer. Simon Peter, right? Why was his name Peter? He changed his name to Peter, or Jesus changed his name to Peter. Well, because he represents Pisces. The ruling planet of Pisces is Jupiter, or Jew-Peter. So that's where that comes from. Why he was betrayed with a kiss from Judas, we did that. Why he was dead for 3 days, we did that. Why his birthday's on December 25th, we did that. It's not just random passages in the Bible that could be decoded this way. I'm going to leave this up to you. If you want me to go through the book of Matthew, the whole book of Matthew, I could show you how it's all astrology. It's not just random passages. It's the whole book.
Do you want to just maybe pick out some of the more interesting examples of it?
I can go through the first few. So Matthew 3:2, repent of your sins and turn to God, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Well, the kingdom of heaven is Leo, okay, because that's when the sun is in Leo, and I mentioned that before. Each gospel begins at one of the 4 major points of the zodiac and ends at one of them. If the kingdom of heaven is Leo, the closest major point is June 21st in Cancer, which I've highlighted on the left. Okay. Then this is the firmament between Cancer and Leo. So when they're talking about the firmament in the Bible, they're talking about these dividing lines that separate the signs. That's the firmament. It's not a flat earth thing with a dome over it. That's not what it is. It's the beginning of the kingdom. There's a saying in the Bible that says the firmament shows God's handiwork. Now, the firmaments are dividing lines between signs. Now, the next passage is Matthew 3:4. John's clothes were woven from coarse camel hair, and he wore a leather belt around his waist. For food, he ate locusts and wild honey. If we take the most famous drawing of a man, Da Vinci's Vitruvius Man, and superimpose it on the zodiac, we can make sense of this. For the record, you don't need to use the Vitruvian Man. You could use a cartoon man, as long as it looks like this. Cancer being the head is where he eats the wild honey. In Cancer, there's a star called the Beehive Cluster. We went over this. A little lower on the body, which is Gemini, as I've circled, is the clothes made out of camel hair, or Camelopardalis, which is in Gemini. So right there, you have the head and the upper body so far. Moving a little lower on the body, that's Taurus, the bull, you'll get the midsection, which is where you'd wear a belt. Well, cow, that's where the leather comes from. Okay? So, and regarding that, Orion's belt sits between Taurus and Gemini. Okay, so that's just further. Next would be the baptism. Now, how are we going to go from the beginning of Leo, which is where we were, to the water sign signifying the baptism? You would go across the zodiac. Cross signs, as they are known, are signs of opposite location. For example, Aries and Libra are cross signs. This is very important. A sign's two most important signs are its neighboring sign and its cross sign. This is encoded in the book as well. Here we see how it makes a leap from one firmament to another. The man with the water pitcher in Aquarius is personified as John the Baptist with the water, because that's how you baptize someone. It's the man with the water pitcher. It's important to note, too, that John the Baptist and Jesus are exactly always 6 months apart. When you think about the fact that Jesus is born on December 25th and rises a degree a day, then that must mean that John the Baptist is born on June 24th, which is 6 months later, and decreases a degree a day. This is why in John 3:30, John says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." It's also why St. John's Day is exactly 6 months to the day of the birth of Jesus. So the next story is the temptation of Jesus. So we're going back to the Cancer-Leo firmament of July 24th. This is really simple, this one. You just count 40 days from July 24th. That takes you to September 2nd, which is Virgo, okay? Because he's in the temptation for 40 days. Everybody knows this, where he's tempted by the devil. This is right in the middle of Virgo, the virgin with the wheat stalk. What does the devil say? Matthew 4:3, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread." Here we see the mention of the bread, which tells you that the sun is in Virgo. There's another section in the Bible where Jesus feeds the masses with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. Well, the 2 fish are the signs of Pisces, literally. And its cross sign, which I already mentioned is prevalent in the Bible, is Virgo, the bread. The next passage is 5:17 and 22. "I did not come to abolish the law, and if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment." Well, we know that law and judgment is Libra. It takes place in the firmament of Virgo, Libra. When you're at the firmament, it can be used on either side. So if I'm in the firmament of Leo, Virgo, I could talk about bread or I could talk about a lion. Okay? When you're at a firmament line, you can talk about either or. You could jump back and forth. Matthew 7:9-10. "If your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead?" Once again, this being the firmament between Virgo and Libra, it has switched back to Virgo. Matthew 17. This is the last one I'm going to do. Matthew 7:15-16. "Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, and can you pick the grapes from the thorn bushes?" The sheep are the ram Aries, and the grapes are in Libra. Once again, these are opposing sign. Moving along, Matthew 13. Later in the same day, Jesus left the house and sat beside the lake. The story now moves from Libra to the barrier between Aquarius and Pisces, as he is right beside the lake, or the 2 water signs. It's the cross sign is Leo, Virgo firmament. As it's across from Virgo, the wheat stalk, the grains, is it ironic that the next parables are the wheat and the weeds, the mustard seed, and the yeast? I mean, I could finish this up. I don't have that many more things to do, but to be honest with you, like, I think you get the point. You could see how this is like literally, I'm going verse for verse in the Bible, and you could see how it's just talking about the zodiac wheel. Okay? Now, this is the important thing that we want to get to. Roman Catholic Catechism 2116. "All forms of divination are to be rejected. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead, or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future. Consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretation of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone." The Catholic Church is openly telling you there's no astrology. Don't get into astrology. There's no astrology here. There's nothing to see here. You'd think that somebody there knows what it is, right? You'd think that somebody would know I mean, I figured this out, you know, I'm no genius. I just know what to look for. You know, I'm sure somebody somewhere knows this. And yet the Catholic Church is openly telling you astrology is evil.
Yeah, that's why do you think that is?
Because they want to keep this information from you.
They want to keep
Because since 325 AD, you're supposed to take literal Christianity. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take literal Christianity. You're not supposed to decode this. You're not supposed to figure this out.
So they didn't want you to see the I guess the information that was hidden in plain sight and
right. Now that you've seen my presentation, you would agree that there's clearly astrology in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I think it's undeniable that, you know, obviously these things can't, I mean, it's like anything in the conspiracy theory world, you know, I say it all the time. I'm like, how many coincidences do you need before it becomes something that you accept? You know, it's like, you know, they can't all be coincidences, you know,
right.
All these things kind of lining up and making sense.
And like I said, I've broken down the book of Enoch. I've broken down the book of Revelation. I've broken down a Gnostic text that's not in the Bible called the book of Raziel. Raziel was the angel that God sent down to earth to teach Adam and Eve how to live outside of paradise when they got kicked out. Okay? All these books are the same way. You could decode them all the same way.
Now, what's your opinion on like the Freemasons, for example, who obviously are also very much into symbolism and ancient knowledge and kind of you know, that type of thing?
Well, the thing about Freemasons is I kind of sort of joined them. It's what people think about the Freemasons is not true. Every single person that I've talked to, that I respect as a human being, who knows their esoteric stuff, said it is the best thing that could ever happen is to join them. Whereas the people who are just into conspiracies are the ones who will tell you that it's evil. It's not. They're very good people. You know, well, they're not a secret society. They're a society that has secrets.
And what you mean by that is that it's just one you would refer or you would assume are doing evil things, another one you would assume they're not.
Exactly. There's nothing evil going on in the Freemasons. I know the local chapter. I know them.
Pat Miletich is a Freemason and from the Conspiracy Farm and also the UFC legend. He's obviously been on the show before, and I know he openly talks about it. I mean, some people believe that it's the higher levels that would know, you know, what the true intentions are.
I know 32nd degree Masons. The one who brought me in was a 32nd degree Mason. He's my age. He heard me on a podcast and he was like, I've never heard this information before. You want to come meet? And then I struggled with it for a little bit, but then I went and I met, and it's a local chapter. It's around the corner for me. It's like 4 miles away. And
so what are some of the, I mean, obviously without giving anything away or getting in trouble, what for somebody listening who's a normie who might not even know what exactly the Freemasons do or what they study or what they're, you know, what the whole point of it is, how would you give them a
well, I wouldn't be able to because I just got voted in. So I don't have that information. Even if it was, I don't know if I would give it out, but I can tell you this right now is I know them. I know these people. I've gotten to know them. There's nothing sinister going on. I mean, they do charity work, for God's sakes.
Well,
it's just.
What's the symbolism, their logo and all that stuff? What do you think some of the, you know, what's some of the stuff that they are intrigued with in regards to symbolism? What you think is just?
I honestly don't know yet.
But you're good at dissecting this stuff. I mean, do you have a hunch on like what?
No, I mean, I thought for what it was worth that it was the negativity that I heard. It doesn't seem to be that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had some internal battle myself in regards to it because, you know, when I've met many other people, but publicly on the show, I know Pat Miletich has been on, and he's a Freemason. He doesn't seem like a evil, bad person. You know, it's almost like some people make the they use the example of like, look at the Vatican, like most people don't know what they're truly doing or what their true intentions are, or that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, the idea of kind of just sharing wisdom and kind of knowledge, and being into symbolism and stuff like that, and kind of, it seems like they're learning from our ancestors, and kind of just forwarding that information and wisdom through symbolism and stuff like that. Obviously, there's some huge influence in like just the origin of America, also. Obviously with the founding fathers, and so many of past presidents were Freemasons and stuff like that. But so you're joining them, and it doesn't sound like you've dived too deep into the topic.
No, I'm just going in there with open eyes, to be honest with you.
Is it out of fear of consuming some information that would give you would make you prejudge what they're doing and who they are?
Yeah, I mean, all I've heard is the stuff that I've heard about them. So which is not true. Which is not true from what I gather.
And
So,
do you think that they're going to be intrigued with some of your knowledge and some of the stuff?
Yeah, they're interested in it for sure. Absolutely.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have any opinions on like the American dollar, how it has some of the symbolism on there, the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, any of that stuff?
No. I don't, because what I don't like doing is conspiratizing.
Yeah.
I like to talk about things that I can make a case for, whereas that's something that you never know what it really is.
Yeah, it's always intriguing to me, because obviously it must have some other meaning. There's no pyramids in the US. Why they put that there was always, and I'm sure maybe somebody like Marty Leeds or somebody probably could have are you familiar with Marty Leeds, his work?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he's another guy who's super intriguing and dives deep into this stuff. We're thinking of doing another Union of the Unwanted show on like spirituality and maybe biblical stuff and religious stuff. Obviously, you and Jay Dyer and Marty Leeds would be perfect for that type of episode. But I think those topics are important, because, like I said in the beginning of the show, asking these bigger questions about like the meaning of it all. Searching for those type of answers. I think in many cases it's deep rooted in our DNA. Just constantly looking for answers and trying to figure things out. But it's stuff that we should do, and we don't do enough of. Asking those bigger questions. And I think many times people who do, they pursue a life of more purpose and more fulfillment and things that are much more important, instead of just like kind of gathering monetary stuff and material stuff, which is gives you this temporary satisfaction and really doesn't leave much behind in regards to like a legacy or a ripple effect, to use my own term. So it's intriguing for people who are listening, because the thing is, all the stuff we kind of went over and reviewed has a huge effect on the type of book that you write and all this stuff. So it really, I mean, you use a lot of the stuff that you learn, and I've heard you say this on interviews, where basically they're called fictional books, but they're not really. They're fictional characters based on real stuff, right?
Yep. That's exactly what it is. It's like, what you're going to do when you pick up my book is you're going to come across some pieces of information, and you're going to go, nah, this is bullshit, and look it up and find out it's true. And you're going to go, okay. And then you're going to keep reading, and it's going to happen again. And then eventually it's going to happen like 7 or 8 times. And you're going to be like, all right, I'm just assuming everything is true, because everything that I've written about is true. All the stuff that's hidden, hidden knowledge, everything, it's all going to be there.
Have you with everything that's going on with 2020 and obviously going forward, do you see any history repeating, any, just from like reading all the reading and research you've done?
It's hard to say. I mean, you look at the news and it's just gross. you know, like what's going on, what's being pushed these days. It's terrible. And I don't get political because my agent told me not to, and my publicist told me not to. But
yeah, I mean, I don't get political. I mean, I don't get political in regards to picking a team. I mean, I try to bash everybody as equally as possible. And you know, like I always say on the show, I'm a political atheist. You know, I don't. You know, I don't like joining any team and feeling the need to have to defend them. I mean, I have a lot of libertarian friends, but I don't like calling myself a libertarian, even if I believe in some of their values, just because I feel like then I have to protect those ideas. And
I'm personally more comfortable forging my own path.
yeah,
It's like how you said originally you were, you know, you were religious or whatever at first, and then you became an atheist and you tried to join their group. It's more than that, though. We're individuals. We should be able to think like individuals. We don't need to just submit to groupthink.
yeah. Well, that's the fascinating thing about U.S. politics. I mean, you go to places overseas. I mean, they have many different political parties, so it makes sense that. I mean, that makes much more sense because you shouldn't agree. You shouldn't be able to take all the huge population in the U.S. and say that everybody's divided into two parties. Like you agree on every issue with this party, or you agree with every issue within that party.
But there's people that swear by that. They wait for the news to tell them what to be offended about next.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, but humans should be much more complex with their thinking and their ideas. And
That's why I love doing this podcast circle. You know, you, Sam, Charlie, Ricky. I actually know a couple podcasters in Colorado. Charlie's in Colorado.
yeah,
There's one called the Leak Project. I'm friends with Rex Bear. He's in Colorado. Oppenheimer Ranch is in Colorado. You know, I got to go out there one time and drop shrooms or something.
yeah, absolutely. So for listeners, can you tell people where they can get your book, if they want to stay connected with you?
Absolutely.
Any other
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter and Facebook at Real Mr. Dank. Well, on Twitter, I'm Real Mr. Dank, but you can look up Micah Dank. I'm the only one there. And Facebook's the same. And I run a Facebook group called Into the Rabbit Hole where I post all these interviews and such because I don't have my own YouTube channel and I'm going to keep it that way. So I just post these interviews and stuff or little snippets of stuff that I'm working on. You can get my books on Amazon. The first 4 are out of 6 already. Into the Rabbit Hole is the series. You can look up Micah Dank. The other thing you can do is if you reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook and you're interested in signed copies or you just don't want to give Bezos your money, which believe it or not, I've been sending so many copies, so many author copies that are signed. Like so many people just don't want to deal with Amazon. So I send them direct. I sign them. I send them direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having the same issue with Patreon because Patreon's been harassing people like James Corbett and Whitney Webb and The Last American Vagabond, Ryan. And so a lot of people are just like, you know, they're like, dude, I love your show, but I'm just, I can't use Patreon anymore. You know, they're censoring people, and Amazon's the same thing. It's like, I mean, obviously there's plenty of issues with Amazon. We're such creatures of convenience, you know, and it's just like it's really hard for people not to use it and completely neglect it because they made it so easy, you know, and I always try to do my best, especially in the restaurant world. Like I never go to chain restaurants. I always go to mom and pop places. I think prior to 2020, chain restaurants were dying. I think that a lot of people were spending much more time going to a local coffee shop, going to, you know, a local restaurant. They understand that you're basically investing in the community. Those people shop, you know, in the community. Those people live in the community. They pay taxes in the community. So it was nice to kind of support one another. Obviously, after 2020, they just literally made the richest of people richer, and you know, and then you know, killed small businesses, and any small businesses that are still surviving. I'm sure many of them are in debt. My wife's been in the restaurant business her whole life, and it's you know, in Massachusetts, and I'm sure New York was very similar. I mean, they had a horrendous 2020, even late in 2020 during the holidays, where you think like, okay, things will pick up a little bit. People are going out. People are, you know, in the kind of giving spirit. The dictator Baker just kept scaring people not to go out, stay home, stay home, stay home. And so, you know, luckily the restaurant she works at and a lot of local restaurants where I know the owners and stuff, they survived, but you know, they barely survived. And anybody who knows anything about the restaurant business, it's already just during regular times one of the hardest industries to survive in and succeed in. So you just made it almost completely impossible. And the worst part, there was no logic to any of the stuff that they were doing. I mean, at least previously in the beginning of all this, they would try to give you some bullshit science on why they were giving these specific regulations and rules and restrictions. And then it just got to a point where just like, yeah, we're going to add a curfew at 9:30. Why? Oh, we're just because we just think, you know, cases are going up or something. So we're going to do it. And they don't give you any reason or explanation on how it's going to help or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's just, it's really bad. I mean, Massachusetts, I am ready to get the fuck out of here. If I could make a living going somewhere else, I would be in Florida in 2 seconds. My wife has some family in Florida. I know it's you know, it's certain spots aren't the cheapest places to live at, but you know, you spend a little less and then you can you know, you can make it work. But you know, how's New York been throughout all this?
Fucking terrible. I mean, it's been great for me because I just do podcasts and sell books, you know, but
A lot of your friends and family people have been really hit hard by all this stuff.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people are on unemployment.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So in Massachusetts, same here. We had this huge uptake of unemployment. Unemployment just went crazy because of all the restrictions and everybody getting laid off and businesses shutting down. But then because there was so much unemployment, there's also tons of fraud. So what happened was that unemployment, they end up putting more steps for people to get their unemployment money. So you had to send like ID, like pictures of all your ID, your like passport, your social security card, your it's a proof of address, you know, some letter that came in the mail. You could take a picture of it and send them your address. A lot of people were sending this snail mail to Boston to unemployment. And but they don't have anybody at the office because the offices were shut down. So they literally were like checking the mail from time to time and were like months behind. I know people who were on unemployment for 3-4 months didn't get one paycheck, and it's like, to me, that's fucking ridiculous. And you know, you just do what you have to do to get these people the money, because if it's your fault why they're unemployed, in many cases it was your restrictions, it was your, you know, your nonsense that caused this, then you should take responsibility for it and get people their money, you know. And I know people who work construction who they go on unemployment every single year at the same time. And they're like, well, why do I have to go through these hula hoops, like, you know, to prove that this isn't fraud? I'm like, I've been on unemployment every year for freaking 20 years. Like, you know, this isn't new. I work a seasonable job, you know, like it was madness. I mean, and they just don't give a shit. You know, they don't care because most of these politicians are millionaires. They're making money. They're living normal. You know, there's like that picture of John Kerry just recently
where he's on the plane,
yeah, without a mask, and then obviously everybody knows what happened to Newsom and going out to eat at one of the most expensive restaurants in the U.S. with all his friends. Oh, I didn't count how many people were at the table. You're telling people to put their mask up while chewing, and then we're supposed to accept the answer of like, well, I didn't count that many people. It's like you're telling us that we're murderers if we leave the house and we're not wearing a mask and we're not doing all these things you want us to do, but you're just casually going to a restaurant and not counting. Like, it's such nonsense. I mean, his vineyard stayed open. His kids still went to a private school. I mean,
I would like to see Chrissy do a podcast with a few porn stars and Fauci and have them just rip Fauci apart.
We'll call it the Fauci orgy.
Yeah.
But, well, you know what's funny is that, so I don't know if you saw that interview he did with that Mexican actor, Eugenio.
I think so.
If anybody hasn't seen it, please check it out, because I think that he went in on the interview like just thinking it was going to be softball questions and it was going to be super easy. And this guy went back at him and actually made him follow up on questions and was calling him out on his inconsistencies. Because many times people ask these questions, they give you the political answer, like the same, talking points, and people just accept it as an answer and they move on. And what Eugenio was doing was he was actually calling him out on it, and he was pushing back. And it was so obvious that he was lying. He talked about, he asked him, like, for example, he asked him how many of the vaccines were FDA approved. And he just, instead of saying none, because they're not FDA approved the way that normally vaccines are, we're in a state of emergency, so we can fast track this whole approval thing and skip a bunch of steps in the process. Instead of saying that, he goes, yeah, so the Moderna one's FDA approved, all this, and he's like, wait, but he's like, they're not approved. And he actually, so he follows up with another question, like, they're not approved the way vaccines, because obviously what he's doing, Fauci, is selling you bullshit and lying to you, saying that they're FDA approved, and they're not. And then same thing with, like, he brought up how he's like, why do kids have to get the vaccine, or why do people who've already got the virus have to get the vaccine, and all this stuff. And he's like, well, kids are, because they can spread it to other people. And he's like, wait, but doesn't the vaccine companies themselves tell you it doesn't stop the spread of the virus? So he has to just, you could just see him. I mean, he's just trying to come up with any creative way whatsoever to answer these questions without directly answering these questions and acknowledging them. And it's just like, this is the person that we fucking believe and trust. I mean, just my last episode, I did a 2-hour episode with Dr. Joel Hirschhorn, and he wrote a book, Pandemic Blunder, and it goes through, I mean, it's literally just like almost 2 hours of just talking about Dr. Fauci, his history, all the money he has control of, with the National Institute of Health and all this stuff. He's the highest paid government employee, This guy doesn't know shit about science and research. He spends all his time on TV. Like, he's a celebrity. He's always on TV.
He had Vanity Fair or some shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's throwing out the first pitch. He's on Today's Show, then he's on Good Morning America, and he's on all these shows. I mean, it's like, dude, you don't, like, literally all you are a PR guy. You're just you're just basically trying to sell the vaccine. So it's wild, man. We live in a crazy world, which sometimes it's nice to have these type of episodes where we kind of get away from those topics. But it is one of those topics that you just can't ignore for too long, because next thing you know, there's a huge story that you have to discuss and you have to talk about. And so it's hard to ignore it when it's having, I mean, I've said this on the show before. Geopolitics, when I first got into doing research and really got into being motivated in regards to what was going on in the world, geopolitics and wars and unjust wars and war propaganda, military industrial complex, these were all things that were very motivating to me to want to do something and speak out. But it was hard to get other people motivated because it didn't affect you. But this topic affects everybody. So I feel like it's something that's really brought out the passion out of people and made people more active and more. I mean, there's been in 2020, there's so many podcasters and so many new shows and so many, I've been doing this since 2013, late 2013. But so many new shows have come out because people have just felt like, I can't just keep consuming this content. I need to do something, and I'm doing it. But it is funny how, like, people who are new to my show, and you brought it up in regards to how hard it was initially for you to get a agent and start getting attention in regards to publishing books.
I have over 250 rejections, and I kept all the emails.
Wow. To me, that's important, because too often, like, so for example, people start seeing you on all these shows and are like, Micah must be killing it. He must be doing really well. He just came out of nowhere, like, all of a sudden he's killing it. And it's like, no. Before you're successful, there's a lot of bumps in the road. And a lot of times you don't see those bumps in the road. So, but I think talking about them are important, because there's a lot of people who are struggling, podcasters or authors or researchers or whatever artistic pursuit you're following. Like, a lot of times you just want to give up because you see other people succeed and you're like, how come I'm not them? How come nobody wants me on their show to talk about my book, or how come I can't get an agent? So talking about these things, I think, is motivation to those people, because it's like, listen, before we succeed, we failed a lot. And the difference between, in many cases, the difference between somebody who succeeds and somebody who fails is the person who succeeds never gave up. And sometimes, a little bit of luck comes your way, But you know what? If you give up, you're never going to even give yourself the opportunity to get lucky. So usually it's not coincidental that the people who get lucky are also the people who work their asses off and keep pursuing it. And so it's awesome to see. I'm assuming your book's hopefully doing well, and hopefully all these interviews you're doing is gonna help out. Do you have a specific website for just your stuff yet, or you
I
just?
don't. I had an issue with my website. I had someone build it, and then I had a problem with them, and then they took it down, and I'm just like fighting them on it. It's a long story, but basically that's why I tell people, if you want signed copies of my books,
Contact you directly?
contact me directly.
Awesome. Yeah, and anything you want me to put in the show description, just send it to me, and I'll put those links there, and that way it'll be easy for people to just contact you and get a hold of you and whatnot. And I know that you're pretty good with if somebody contacts you, you're pretty good with getting back to them at a reasonable time. And so yeah, thanks again for all your time. Hopefully I see you again on either this episode or a future Union of the Unwanted episode, and we'll keep in touch, and thanks again.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks. Take care.
Take care.